The wedding invitations went out last month. Cream-colored envelopes, gold calligraphy, each one carefully sealed with a wax stamp. Every single person who mattered to me got one except her. She wouldn't see it coming. How could she back? In junior high, she made sure I knew exactly where I stood, beneath her. She made a sport out of humiliating me, chipping away at my confidence with every sarcastic jab and cruel smirk. She thought I'd always be the quiet, awkward girl she could push around. But in just a few months, I'll be walking down the aisle to marry her brother. The first day of junior high should have been exciting. New teachers, new classes, maybe even new friends. But my stomach was in knots as I stood in front of my closet that morning. I must have changed outfits 3 times before settling on a teal sweater and black jeans. It was nothing special, but I thought it made me look put together. By the time I stepped into the buzzing hallway, the air felt heavy with voices, laughter, and the clang of lockers. I clutched my schedule like a lifeline, scanning for room 214. That's when I saw her, a tall girl with honey blonde hair and perfect posture, surrounded by 3 other girls, hanging on her every word. I didn't know her name yet, but I would. Everyone would. It didn't take long to learn her name, Amber. She wasn't loud in a class clown way, but her presence was magnetic. Teachers smiled at her. Boys tried to make her laugh, and girls, well, they either wanted to be her friend or stayed out of her way. My first real encounter with Amber came in homeroom. I sat down in the second row, pulling out my notebook. She slid into the desk beside me and glanced at my sweater. A slow smile spread across her face. Asterisk, wow, bold choice. Asterisk, she said. Just loud enough for the 2 girls in front of us to hear. They giggled, and my cheeks burned. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a comment. But Amber had a way of turning just a comment into something that stuck under your skin. That afternoon in math, she passed me a folded note. I opened it to see just 3 words written in neat cursive. Asterisk, nice thrift store. Asterisk, my heart sank. She didn't need to say more. The message was clear. She saw me. She judged me. And she wanted me to know I didn't measure up. Over the next few weeks, Amber's remarks became a quiet drumbeat in my life. She never yelled or caused a scene. It was always the quick, cutting whisper, the perfectly timed giggle, the raised eyebrow during my presentations. One day, I gave a history report I'd spent hours preparing. Halfway through, I caught her, smirking at her friend, who scribbled something on a page and passed it over. They both stifled laughs. My voice faltered. My palms were slick against the index cards. When I sat down, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the teacher's good job. The cafeteria was the worst. It was loud, chaotic, and every move felt like it could be judged. One afternoon, I sat alone at a corner table, unpacking the sandwich my mom had made. Amber and her friends walked by, trays in hand. She stopped, tilted her head, and looked at my lunch. Asterisk, peanut butter and jelly? That's cute. Asterisk, her friends laughed, not cruelly loud, but just enough for me to feel the heat rising in my face. I wanted to vanish into the tiled floor. That was Amber's specialty, making you feel like you didn't belong, without ever raising her voice. It wasn't long before I realized I wasn't Amber's only target. One day in science class, a shy girl named Leah raised her hand to answer a question about the solar system. She stumbled over her words, and Amber's voice cut through the air. Do you need a GPS to find your point? The class chuckled, and Leah's shoulders sank like she'd been hit. I saw it happen over and over. Amber would pick someone, dissect, their weakness, and serve it up with a smile that made it look like a joke. Her cruelty was so subtle, you almost questioned if it was real. But the impact, always real. By October, my mornings had changed. I no longer dressed for myself, I dressed for survival. Neutral colors, simple hair, nothing that could invite commentary. But somehow, Amber always found something. The worst part wasn't the words, it was how they made me feel invisible and exposed at the same time. I started wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I was as awkward as she made me feel. That's the thing about subtle cruelty. It seeps in until you start doing the bully's job for them. One afternoon in English, Amber made a snide remark about my handwriting. The teacher, Mr. Carlson, was right there. He just chuckled and said, "Amber's got a sharp tongue." Like it was a charming personality quirk. That was when I understood why she got away with it. She was smart enough to do it in a way that made adults see her as witty, not cruel. And if no one called her out, what hope did I have? There were days when I thought maybe someone would stand up for me. But every time, the opposite happened. If Amber made a joke at my expense, even kids who were usually nice to me laughed. Not because they were mean, but because it was easier to laugh than to risk being next. It hurt, but I understood. That was how Amber controlled the room, fear disguised as humor. It was November when I finally snapped. She made a crack about the scuffed sneakers I was wearing. And I muttered, "At least I don't need to insult people to feel important." For a split second, there was silence. Then Amber smiled. Slowly. "Oh, sweetheart. You think that's an insult? Cute." The room laughed, and I shrank back into my seat. My attempt at defending myself had only given her more power. By winter break, I'd stopped sitting near anyone in the cafeteria. I spent lunch in the library, telling myself I preferred the quiet. But the truth was, I just didn't want to give Amber the chance to humiliate me in front of a crowd. I started writing in a journal, not about my feelings, but about little fantasies of one day being untouchable, living a life so far from hers she'd never be able to reach me. The more she picked on people, the more her popularity grew. She was everywhere. Yearbook photos, school play announcements, sports teams. It was like the school couldn't get enough of her. Every hallway I walked down, there was her laugh. That high, confident sound that made my stomach clench before I even saw her. In art class, we were assigned to make dioramas. I poured hours into mine, carefully painting tiny details. When I went to present it, I found one of the figures broken. Amber was across the room, smiling faintly, twisting something small in her fingers. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. And she knew I knew. Gym was always a nightmare, but dodgeball day was hell. I hated the game, and Amber loved it. When I missed catching the ball, she shouted, "Heads up, everyone, she's allergic to athleticism." The coach laughed. My face burned as I shuffled to the bench. Asterisk in history class, a folded note landed on my desk. My heart did a stupid little jump. Maybe someone wanted to be friends. I opened it to find the words, "Sit somewhere else, loser." I glanced around. Amber and her friends were staring at me, barely hiding their grins. By spring, she'd moved beyond jokes to outright lies. One rumor claimed I cheated on a test. Another said I had a crush on a teacher. Each one spread faster than I could defend myself. It didn't matter if people believed them. The damage was in the whispering, the side glances, the feeling of being a punchline. I stopped looking in mirrors for too long. I avoided photos. I even hesitated to raise my hand in class, terrified of giving her new ammunition. When you're 13, you believe what people tell you about yourself, and Amber was relentless. By the end of the year, I had perfected invisibility. I walked the long way to classes, kept my head down, and made myself small. It worked. She picked on me less. But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt erased. There were rare moments that kept me going, like the time Leah smiled at me in passing, or when I got an A on a science test and the teacher praised my work in front of the class. They were small victories, but they were mine. Graduation day felt like shedding a heavy coat I'd been forced to wear for years. I saw Amber across the gym, laughing with her friends, and told myself I'd never have to deal with her again. If only I'd known how wrong I was. Graduation day felt like a liberation. As my name was called, I walked across the stage with a tight smile, clutching my diploma like it was a ticket to a better life. Amber stood in line a few names behind me, her laugh carrying across the gym. I didn't look back. I told myself this was the last day. Her voice would echo in my head. The first weeks of summer felt strange, like I was living without a constant background noise. No whispered jokes behind my back. No calculated accidental bumps in the hallway. I started wearing clothes I liked again, experimented with new hairstyles, and felt just for a moment like myself. But the illusion shattered one humid afternoon. I was in line at a smoothie shop when I heard a familiar laugh. Amber. She strolled by with two friends, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. Wow. She murmured just loud enough, didn't know they sold those shoes outside a thrift store. Her friends giggled. Just like that, I was 13 again. High school was supposed to be different. Bigger campus, more people, a fresh start. But it wasn't long before I spotted Amber in the hallway, still with her polished hair and predatory smile. It was almost impressive. She didn't have to try hard to command attention. People gravitated to her. Her new group wasn't the same as in middle school, but the dynamic was identical. She was the sun, and everyone else orbited her. I tried to blend into the background, focusing on my studies, but she had a way of making me visible exactly when I didn't want to be. It happened in my second month. I tripped on a chair leg while carrying a tray. Food slid across the table. Amber's voice rang out, careful. She's feeding the floor now. The laughter that followed felt louder than the clatter of the tray hitting the tile. High school Amber was more strategic. She didn't just insult, she undermined. Once, I found my homework missing from my binder right before class. Weeks later, I saw it crumpled in the corner of the locker room. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. I started spending more time in the library, not just to study, but to hide. The librarian, Mrs. Grayson, noticed. She began recommending novels she thought I'd like, strong, silent protagonists who endured hardship and came out victorious. I clung to those stories like lifelines. It was in the library that I met Ethan. He was tall, quiet, and had the kind of humor you had to listen for. We bonded over our shared preference for staying out of the spotlight. With him, I didn't have to explain why I hated crowded hallways or why my stomach tightened when Amber passed by. Amber noticed him too. She started greeting him in the hallway, her smile sugar-sweet. One afternoon, she brushed past me and said under her breath, "Don't worry, I won't steal all your friends." My cheeks burned, but Ethan didn't seem to hear. By the end of freshman year, I realized something. Amber's shadow wasn't going to disappear on its own. If I wanted a life where she didn't dictate how I felt about myself, I'd have to build it piece by piece, quietly, but deliberately. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first step toward the revenge she'd never see coming. Sophomore year began with a strange mix of dread and hope. Over the summer, I had grown a few inches, changed my haircut, and learned how to make my clothes fit the way I liked. It didn't make me immune to Amber, but I could feel small layers of armor forming. Amber didn't waste time. On the second day of school, I caught her leaning against the lockers, chatting with Ethan. He looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. She noticed me approaching, gave a little wave, and said, "We were just talking about how cute your friend is." My stomach tightened, but I kept walking. I refused to give her the reaction she wanted. Over the next few weeks, she began weaving herself into his orbit. She'd sit near us at lunch, toss him compliments in the hallway, and once even accidentally brushed his arm when passing by. Ethan, oblivious, just thought she was being nice. I knew better. This was a test, a way to remind me that nothing I cared about was out of her reach. One afternoon, Ethan and I were studying in the library when Amber appeared out of nowhere. She slid into the seat across from us, her smile glinting like a blade. "Mind if I join? I'm so behind on algebra." Mrs. Grayson, the librarian, gave her a pointed look but said nothing. For an hour, Amber sat there pretending to ask questions. But really, she was steering the conversation toward embarrassing stories about me from middle school. Ethan listened politely, but I could see him starting to piece things together. Later that week, Ethan pulled me aside. "She's intense," he said carefully. "You two have history, huh?" I told him enough for him to understand without dragging him into my bitterness. He nodded, and from then on, he kept a polite but definite distance from her. It was a small victory, but it tasted sweeter than I expected. That year, I threw myself into schoolwork. I joined the debate team, something I'd always wanted to try but never dared. Speaking in front of people was terrifying at first, but with every competition, I got better. And each time I stood at the podium, I imagined Amber in the audience, forced to watch me command a room she couldn't control. Still, she didn't disappear. There were whispered comments in the hallway, sudden bursts of laughter when I walked by, and the occasional accidental shove. But each time, I found it easier to shake it off. She hadn't changed, but I was changing. Slowly, my identity was becoming less about surviving her and more about building something for myself. By spring, I had been nominated for a Student Leadership Award. The ceremony was in the gym, the same place where we'd graduated middle school. As I walked to the stage to accept it, I caught Amber's expression in the crowd. It wasn't anger or even contempt, it was surprise. Like she hadn't expected me to be capable of anything beyond enduring her presence. For the first time, I saw a crack in her confidence. That moment stayed with me. It wasn't revenge, not yet. But it was the first real shift in power I'd felt since we were kids. I started to realize something important. The best revenge might not be loud or immediate. It might be quiet, patient, and devastatingly timed. College was a fresh start I didn't know I needed. Different town, different people, and not a single trace of Amber. For the first time in years, I could walk across campus without scanning the crowd for her face. It felt like breathing clean air after years in a smoky room. Ethan and I kept in touch here and there, but life pulled us in separate directions. He went to a different school, dated a few people, and I buried myself in lectures, internships, and late-night study sessions. Amber was just a ghost from the past, or so I thought. One summer, I came home to work a local job and save some money. My friends invited me to a party. It was one of those backyard gatherings. String lights and music floating through the warm air. That's when I noticed him, tall, leaner than I remembered, standing near the fire pit. We caught each other's eyes, and it was like no time had passed. We started talking, first about safe topics, school, jobs, but soon the conversation deepened. He had grown into someone thoughtful, self-assured. The boy I knew had become a man who listened more than he spoke, and when he smiled at me, it wasn't the friendly smile from high school. It was something warmer. Amber wasn't there that night, but her shadow lingered in my mind. I wondered what she would think if she saw us laughing together. Would it bother her? Would it make her furious? By the end of the night, Ethan asked for my number. I hesitated only for a moment before giving it. We started texting, then calling. Over the months, those conversations turned into meetups. And those meetups turned into something more. It wasn't until much later that I realized Amber had no idea we were talking. Our worlds had drifted so far apart that she wasn't keeping tabs on me anymore. That anonymity was a gift, one I didn't waste. Years passed. Ethan and I built a life together piece by piece. There were trips, inside jokes, shared struggles. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about Amber entirely. She no longer had a place in my story, until she reappeared like a storm on the horizon. A mutual acquaintance mentioned her in passing during a coffee catch-up. Apparently, she was still in town, working a job she hated, and had a revolving door of failed relationships. The news didn't spark pity, just a quiet acknowledgement that life had a way of returning people's energy to them. Then, one night, Ethan told me he wanted to propose. My heart pounded for 1,000 reasons. But in the middle of my joy, a thought crept in. Amber. She would eventually find out. And when she did, it wouldn't be from me. It was in that moment, sitting on our couch with Ethan's hand in mine, that the seed of my revenge took root. Not out of spite alone, but as a final, deliberate closing of a chapter she had poisoned for years. The days after the proposal felt like a dream. Every moment was threaded with excitement, picking a date, imagining the venue, thinking about the people we'd want around us. There was a warm, buzzing energy between Ethan and me, like we were building a fortress together brick by brick. One evening, while scrolling through potential photographers, I stumbled across a mutual friend's post. There she was, Amber, smiling in a group shot, drink in hand, like she owned the room. My stomach didn't twist the way it used to. Instead, I felt a strange clarity. This was my life now, and she didn't belong anywhere in it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that excluding her wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming every ounce of space she had stolen from me. She had spent years making sure I felt like an outsider. Now, for once, she would be the one left outside looking in. When the guest list discussions began, Ethan asked gently, "Do you want to invite your old classmates?" I shook my head without hesitation. "Not all of them," I said. "There's one person I will never invite. Not even as a plus one." He didn't push for details. He already knew. We ordered our custom invitations, cream paper with gold lettering, each envelope sealed with wax. I felt an almost childish thrill imagining Amber hearing whispers about the event and realizing that no invitation would ever arrive for her. That silence would be louder than any confrontation. A few weeks later, I ran into her brother. Ethan's cousin had organized a casual family get-together, and she happened to be there. The moment she saw the ring on my finger, I caught the tiniest flicker of recognition in her eyes. Her smile faltered for just a second before she masked it. I didn't offer an explanation, and she didn't dare ask. That was the beginning of her unraveling. Word about the engagement spread faster than I expected. Mutual acquaintances started sending messages of congratulations, some surprised, others gushing about how perfect Ethan and I looked together. I knew Amber would hear about it soon, if she hadn't already at first. I imagined she might brush it off, but Amber was never the type to ignore something that threatened her ego. She thrived on being in control of every narrative. The fact that her former target was about to marry into her own family would eat at her in a way no insult ever could. A week later, a mutual friend casually asked me, "So, is Amber invited?" The question was loaded, almost like they were testing the waters. I smiled politely. "No," I said simply. "Some people don't deserve front row seats to your happiness." The friend's eyebrows shot up, but they didn't press stop from that point on. I started hearing little things. A comment Amber made at a gathering about how she hoped Ethan knew what he was getting into. A backhanded remark she posted online about people who cling to the past for validation. It was her way of trying to claw back control. Ethan, bless him, never wavered. One night over dinner, I asked if her behavior bothered him. He reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "Amber has no power here anymore. She can only hurt you if you let her." That line became my armor. By midsummer, the wedding plans were in full swing. Fittings, tastings, decor decisions. Every choice felt like a declaration of the life we were building together. Meanwhile, Amber seemed to be circling closer, as if trying to force an invitation through sheer proximity. The first direct hit came when she texted Ethan out of the blue. It was short and dripping with false sweetness. "Hey, I heard you're getting married. So happy for you both. Can't wait to celebrate." Ethan showed it to me immediately, his brow furrowed. I laughed. A low, satisfied laugh I didn't even know I had in me. "She's not coming," I said. "Ever." But Amber didn't take silence as an answer. Over the next few weeks, she tried different angles, messaging Ethan's mom, commenting on his cousin's posts, even dropping vague hints in group chats. It was desperate, transparent, and oddly thrilling to watch. The closer the wedding got, the more I could feel her desperation turning into frustration. That's when I decided it wouldn't just be a quiet exclusion. No, she would know, beyond any doubt, that she was being deliberately left out. I made sure the final round of invitations went out publicly, with plenty of photos of the embossed envelopes being hand-delivered to friends and family. Her name was nowhere in sight. When she saw those posts, she'd have to swallow the truth. She was never part of this celebration, and never would be. Amber's silence after the invitations went out was eerie. For weeks, she'd been this constant, buzzing annoyance in the background. Now, nothing. No snide comments, no passive-aggressive posts. It was almost worse than her meddling. I knew better than to believe she had suddenly found grace. Amber was the kind of person who retreated only to plot something bigger. The absence of her voice felt like the air before a storm, thick, heavy, charged with something inevitable. Ethan, ever the optimist, thought maybe she'd finally accepted the situation. "Maybe she's realized it's not worth the drama," he said one evening as we packed gift bags. I just shook my head. "Amber doesn't give up," I reminded him. "She waits." And she did wait, right until 2 weeks before the wedding. That's when Ethan's cousin, Claire, messaged me in a flurry. "Heads up, Amber was asking if she could come as my +1. I told her no, but she didn't look happy. I felt a cold rush in my chest. So this was her plan. She couldn't get an invite directly, so she was trying to slip in through someone else's. I thanked Claire for shutting her down and told her to let me know if Amber tried again. The following weekend, Amber upped her game. She showed up at a local cafe where Ethan and I were meeting with our photographer. She didn't greet me. She greeted Ethan with exaggerated warmth, ignoring me entirely. It was like she was pretending I didn't exist, which only made me sit taller, smile brighter, and squeeze Ethan's hand just a little tighter. The conversation was short and awkward. She asked vague questions about big day details, as if fishing for an opening. Ethan's polite, but clipped responses left no room for invitation. Eventually, she left, her smile brittle at the edges. After she walked out, our photographer, who'd picked up on the tension, leaned in and whispered, "Was that her?" I nodded. He just grinned. "She's not going to like these pictures then." By the final week before the wedding, Amber's desperation turned visible. She started liking every single wedding-related post I made on social media, almost as if to prove she was part of it. But I knew better. Every like was a silent knock at a locked door. Then came the last attempt, a direct message to me. Short, almost pleading. "I think we got off on the wrong foot years ago. I'd really like to be there for you and Ethan on your special day." I read it 3 times, my lips curling into a smile. I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I wanted her to see it marked as read. Silence can be the loudest rejection. The night before the wedding, the air in our house buzzed with nervous energy. My dress hung in the guest room, veiled in soft fabric like a secret waiting to be revealed. Friends and family filled the space with laughter and last-minute checklists. But in the back of my mind, Amber still lingered, a shadow on the edge of the spotlight. Ethan could sense it. "Don't let her take a single second from tomorrow," he said, wrapping his arms around me. His voice was warm, steady, the grounding I needed. I nodded, but a small part of me still braced for her to try something. People like Amber didn't just fade into the background. They made themselves heard. The morning of the wedding, sunlight poured into my room in soft golden streams. My bridal party moved around me in a flurry, curling irons humming, makeup brushes sweeping, champagne glasses clinking. The air smelled faintly of roses and hairspray. For a moment, I allowed myself to forget Amber entirely. This was my day, my moment, and nothing could take that away. Then, during hair and makeup, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Just so you know, Amber's outside the venue. I saw her in the parking lot when I dropped off the decorations. She's wearing some kind of fancy dress." My heart skipped, then steadied. Of course she'd try. Instead of panic, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd already imagined this exact scenario in my head, Amber making one last desperate bid to insert herself into my life. And now, here it was, unfolding in real time. My bridesmaids saw the look in my eyes and knew without asking, I wasn't going to let her ruin the spot at the venue. I made a quick call to security. The head of staff listened patiently as I explained the situation, his tone crisp and reassuring. "We'll make sure she doesn't get past the entrance," he promised. I could almost hear the steel in his voice. When I arrived at the venue's private entrance, I caught sight of her from a distance. Amber stood near the main doors, craning her neck as if searching for someone. She looked polished,